I'm Haley Mitchell, 32, and I've always been the black sheep in my family. 3 days before my dad's 60th birthday party, the one I spent 2 months planning and $3,800 of my savings on, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "Haley, you're not coming. Dad wants just family." The air left my lungs as I stared at those words. How was I not family after everything? That text message changed everything I thought I knew about belonging. Before I tell you how this painful rejection became the most liberating moment of my life, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if family drama stories resonate with you. Growing up in Mapleton, Minnesota, population 5,628, shaped more than just my accent. Our family home was a tidy 2-story colonial on Elm Street where appearances always mattered more than feelings. My father, Thomas Mitchell, ran the most successful insurance agency in town with an iron fist and cold precision. That same approach extended to parenting 3 very different children. My older brother Kevin was the golden child, captain of the football team, straight-A student, and the natural heir to my father's business. Everything he touched turned to gold, at least in my father's eyes. My younger sister Amy became the family peacemaker, the sweet one who could smooth over tense dinners with a well-timed comment or question. And then there was me, Haley, the perpetual disappointment, the square peg that would never fit into my father's round hole of expectations. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on repeat during every report card season, every family gathering, every career decision. My mother, Diane, floated through our family dynamics like a ghost, physically present but emotionally absent. She'd squeeze my hand under the dinner table when Dad's criticism cut too deep, but never actually stood up for me. "Your father means well," she'd whisper after particularly brutal takedowns. "He just wants what's best for you." But what he wanted wasn't what was best for me, it was what was best for him, for his image, for his legacy. I discovered my love for art and creative writing in middle school. Mrs. Sanderson, my 7th grade English teacher, was the first adult who saw something special in me. She entered my short story in a statewide contest without telling me. When I won first place, my father's response wasn't congratulations but concern. "Writing doesn't pay the bills, Haley. It's a hobby, not a career." That pattern continued through high school. While Kevin's football trophies earned prime real estate in the living room display cabinet, my writing awards and art contest certificates were relegated to a drawer in my bedroom. The message was clear: my achievements weren't real achievements in the Mitchell family hierarchy. Despite the constant undermining, I maintained excellent grades and won a partial scholarship to Northwestern University in Chicago. The day I got my acceptance letter was the closest my father ever came to showing pride in me. "Northwestern has a decent business program," he said, which from him was practically a standing ovation. I didn't have the courage to tell him I was majoring in marketing with a creative focus, not business administration as he assumed. That revelation came during Thanksgiving break of freshman year, igniting an argument that ended with me taking the bus back to campus 3 days early. Chicago became my salvation, 468 miles of blessed distance between me and Mapleton. I thrived in the creative energy of the city, developing a talent for brand storytelling that eventually landed me a junior position at Horizon Marketing Group. 6 years and 3 promotions later, I became the youngest executive in the company's history. My professional success existed in a parallel universe from my family life. During monthly calls home, my mother would ask surface-level questions about my job but never seemed to grasp what I actually did. My father would get on the line for exactly 2 minutes, inquire about my finances, and remind me to contribute to my 401k before handing the phone back to Mom. Even major milestones received minimal acknowledgement. When I bought my condo in Lincoln Park, a huge achievement in Chicago's competitive market, my parents couldn't attend the housewarming because it conflicted with Kevin's son's t-ball game. When I won a National Industry Award, the framed certificate I mailed home was nowhere to be seen during my Christmas visit. Amy at least tried to bridge the gap. She'd call with genuine questions about my life in Chicago, and during her visits, she'd marvel at how big city I'd become. But even she couldn't fully understand the depth of hurt I carried from years of being the family afterthought. The final confirmation of my outsider status came during my grandmother's funeral 3 years ago. As immediate family gathered in a private room before the service, my Uncle Jim asked why I wasn't with them. My father's response, which I overheard from the hallway, "Haley lives her own life now. She's not really involved in family matters anymore." I'd taken 3 days off work and flown home immediately after hearing about Grandma's passing. How was that not involved? But that comment revealed the truth. In my father's mind, my geographic distance had somehow disqualified me from full family membership. After the funeral, I made a conscious decision to stop seeking my father's approval. I limited visits home to major holidays, kept conversations superficial, and built my own chosen family of friends in Chicago. I focused on my career, my relationships, my life, and for the most part, it worked. The ache dulled from sharp pain to occasional twinge. Until my mother called about Dad's 60th birthday, reopening wounds I thought had finally scarred over. The call came on a rainy Tuesday in March. I was leaving a client meeting when my phone lit up with my mother's name. "Your father is turning 60 in May," Mom said after our usual pleasantries. "We should do something special." I waited for her to continue, to share what plans she and Dad had already made. Instead, there was expectant silence on the line. "What were you thinking?" I finally asked. "Well, nothing too fussy. You know your father." But more than just dinner at the lakeside. The lakeside was Mapleton's only non-chain restaurant, where my parents celebrated every anniversary and birthday. I'm still not sure what possessed me in that moment. Perhaps it was the persistent hope that one grand gesture might finally bridge the chasm between my father and me. Or maybe it was simple foolishness. Either way, I heard myself volunteering. "I could help organize something, Mom. I plan corporate events all the time." Her relief was audible. "Would you really? That would be wonderful, Haley. Your father would never say it, but turning 60 has him a bit down. A special celebration might be just what he needs." That single conversation launched 2 months of intensive planning. I created a shared document with my mother, outlining potential venues, catering options, and guest lists. We scheduled weekly planning calls every Sunday evening. I researched the best venues within a 30-mile radius of Mapleton, as the town itself had limited options. Mason's Barn, a renovated historic structure 10 miles outside town, emerged as the perfect location, rustic yet elegant, with space for up to 70 guests. The owner, Martha, was incredibly accommodating when I explained the occasion. "60th birthdays are special," she said. "We'll make sure your dad feels celebrated." I coordinated with a well-reviewed catering company from the neighboring county, selecting a menu that centered around my father's preferences: prime rib, twice-baked potatoes, and his favorite German chocolate cake. I arranged for a local jazz quartet to play the standards he enjoyed, and designed custom invitations featuring a photo of him from his college days, when he still smiled easily in pictures. Mom provided the guest list: extended family members, his insurance agency employees, golf club friends, and neighbors. 63 people in total, representing the connections he'd built over 6 decades of life. I called each one personally to secure RSVPs, explaining that we wanted the party to be a meaningful celebration of my father's life and impact. Throughout this process, my father remained peripherally involved. Mom would occasionally mention, "Your father thinks a cash bar is fine," or "Dad says he doesn't want any gag gifts about getting old." But he never spoke to me directly about the party. I convinced myself this was simply his way, letting the details be handled by others while he maintained his dignified distance. The financial reality of the event became clear about 3 weeks into planning. Mason's Barn required a non-refundable deposit of $1,200 to secure the date. The catering company needed $2,600 paid in advance for food ordering and staff scheduling. "I'll need to talk to your father about the costs," Mom said when I mentioned the deposits. 2 days later, she called back. "Your father thinks it's a bit extravagant. He's wondering if we should just do something smaller." After all the work I'd already invested, scaling back felt like failure. And some stubborn part of me wanted to prove I could create something special, something worthy of acknowledgement. "I'll cover the deposits, Mom. It's my gift to Dad." "Oh, Haley, that's too much. We can't ask you to do that." But I insisted. I transferred $3,800 from my savings account, money I'd been setting aside for a trip to Portugal, directly to the vendors. When I emailed the payment confirmations to my mother, her response was brief: "You're very generous, honey." "Thank you." As the event drew closer, my excitement grew. I requested time off work for the days surrounding the party, booked my flight to Minneapolis, and reserved a rental car. I bought a new dress, conservative enough for Mapleton but stylish enough that I felt confident. I found a vintage watch similar to one my father had admired in a magazine years ago, spending another $340 on what I hoped would be the perfect gift. The week before the party, I called my mother for final confirmations. "Everything's set on my end," I told her. "The venue is ready, catering is confirmed for 63 guests, and the cake will be delivered at 6:30. "That all sounds lovely," she said, but something in her voice seemed off, a slight hesitation, a carefulness in her words. "Is everything okay, Mom? Did Dad change his mind about something?" No. Everything's fine. Your father is just, you know how he gets about being the center of attention." I brushed off my concerns. Of course Dad would be a bit grumpy about a birthday party being celebrated went against his stoic Midwestern nature. The important thing was that everything was in place for a wonderful event. I spent that final week tying up loose ends at work and packing for my trip home. I created a detailed day of timeline, confirmed with the musicians, and ordered flower arrangements featuring the blue hydrangeas my father had meticulously grown in our backyard garden for years. Never once did I imagine that after all this, the planning, the expense, the genuine effort to create something meaningful, I would be explicitly uninvited by text message 3 days before the event. But that's exactly what happened. 3 days before the party, I was multitasking at my kitchen counter, eating lunch while reviewing the final party checklist I'd created. My phone vibrated with a text notification. Seeing my mother's name, I assumed it was another last-minute question about the arrangements. Instead, what appeared on my screen froze me mid-bite. "Haley, you're not coming. Dad wants just family. We'll pay you back eventually." I blinked hard, certain I'd misread. I put down my fork and reread the message. The words remained unchanged. My hand started trembling as I typed back. "What do you mean? I am family. I've been planning this for months. This must be a mistake." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared before her response arrived. "It's complicated. Kevin thought it would be better this way. Dad agreed. Please understand." Understanding was the furthest thing from my mind. I immediately called her, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. She had turned off her phone, a classic Diane Mitchell avoidance tactic I remembered from childhood confrontations. I called my father next, not really expecting him to answer. He never answered his cell phone for me. True to form, his phone also went to voicemail after 2 rings, not even giving the standard 4 rings before redirecting. He had seen my name and declined the call. With shaking hands, I dialed Amy. She picked up on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious. "Haley, hi. Amy, what the hell is going on? Mom just texted saying I'm not invited to Dad's party. The party I planned. The party I paid for." The long pause on the other end told me everything. This wasn't news to her. "I'm so sorry, Haley. I told them this was wrong. I've been arguing with them since yesterday about it." "Yesterday? So this decision wasn't just made? You've all been discussing this behind my back?" Amy's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Kevin came home early. He and Dad were talking about the party, and Kevin brought up how you always make everything about yourself. The injustice of this statement knocked the wind out of me. I had specifically designed every aspect of this event to cater to our father's preferences, putting my own tastes aside completely. That's absolute bullshit, Amy, and you know it. I know. But Kevin convinced Dad that you were only doing this to show off your big city success, to make him feel small about his life in Mapleton. Dad got all worked up, saying he didn't want to be some charity case for his daughter to throw money at. The room seemed to tilt around me. And Mom? What did she say during all this? Another telling pause. She tried to defend you at first, but you know how she gets when Dad and Kevin team up. She just folded. The betrayal cut deep, but something wasn't adding up. Why didn't anyone call me yesterday when this was being discussed? Why wait until 3 days before the party to drop this bomb by text? Amy sighed. They were hoping you'd cancel on your own. Mom kept saying you'd probably get caught up with work and back out at the last minute. The realization that my own family had such a low opinion of me, expecting me to flake on an event I had invested thousands of dollars and countless hours in, was perhaps the most painful part of all. So what's the plan now? They're still having the party at Mason's barn? Using the catering I arranged and paid for? While I sit alone in Chicago? I'm so sorry, Haley. Mom said they'd pay you back. Eventually, I finished bitterly. She said they'd pay me back eventually. Which means never, as we both know. After hanging up with Amy, I sat motionless at my counter, the half-eaten lunch congealing on my plate. The shock gradually gave way to a physical response, my chest tightened, my breathing became shallow, and tears burned behind my eyes. I recognized the beginning of an anxiety attack, something I hadn't experienced since my first year in Chicago. I stumbled to my couch and forced myself to take deep breaths, counting slowly as my therapist had taught me years ago. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. As my breathing steadied, my mind raced through implications. I had already taken Thursday and Friday off work. My non-refundable plane ticket to Minneapolis was booked for tomorrow. The $3,800 in deposits was lost unless I showed up at the venue and personally canceled everything. But beyond the practical concerns loomed the emotional devastation. This wasn't just about a party. This was my family declaring, in the clearest possible terms, that I wasn't really part of them anymore. That blood relation wasn't enough to secure me a place at the table. That night was the longest of my life. I alternated between rage cleaning my apartment, crying into my pillow, and staring blankly at my ceiling. Around 3 a.m., I made a decision that would alter the course of not just the weekend, but my entire relationship with my family. I would go to Mapleton anyway. Not to crash the party or create a scene, but to face this situation head-on. No more passive acceptance of my designated role as family outcast. It was time for honesty, however uncomfortable. With that resolution made, I finally fell into a fitful sleep, my dreams filled with empty banquet halls and locked doors that wouldn't open no matter how hard I knocked. My flight landed in Minneapolis at 11:32 a.m. on Thursday. By 1:15 p.m., I was driving my rental car down the familiar streets of Mapleton, muscle memory guiding me toward the house where I grew up. The spring air was crisp, flowering trees dotted the neighborhoods with splashes of pink and white, and everything looked deceptively normal, as if my world hadn't just imploded. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. The element of surprise seemed necessary, otherwise, I suspected doors would be mysteriously locked, phones unanswered. As I turned onto Elm Street, my stomach clenched at the sight of multiple cars parked in our driveway, Kevin's black SUV, Amy's blue sedan, and 2 vehicles I didn't recognize. I parked across the street, took 3 deep breaths, and walked up the familiar path to our front door. Rather than using my key, which I still carried out of sentiment rather than practicality, I rang the doorbell. Mom answered, her face transforming from polite greeting to shock in the span of seconds. "Haley! What are you doing here?" Her voice pitched higher than normal. eyes darting nervously behind her. "We need to talk, Mom. About the text. About the party. About everything." She stepped onto the porch, partially closing the door behind her. "This isn't a good time, honey. We have people over. Some of the relatives came early for the weekend. I don't care who's here. I just spent thousands of dollars and months planning Dad's party, only to be uninvited by text message. I deserve an explanation, a real one, not some dismissive message." Her eyes welled with tears, my mother's reflexive response to confrontation. "Please don't make a scene, Haley. You know how your father gets." That phrase, "you know how your father gets," had been used my entire life to excuse his behavior, to silence dissent, to maintain the illusion of family harmony at the expense of honesty. "Yes, Mom, I do know how Dad gets. He gets to dictate everyone's feelings. He gets to decide who's family and who isn't. He gets everything his way while the rest of us tiptoe around his moods. I'm done with that." I moved past her into the house before she could stop me. In the kitchen, Amy sat with our Aunt Beth and Cousin Megan, cups of coffee before them. Their conversation halted abruptly when I appeared in the doorway. "Haley." Amy stood up, her expression a mix of surprise and guilt. "I didn't know you were coming." "Clearly," I said. "Where's Dad?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. Aunt Beth, always the most straightforward of my mother's sisters, finally spoke. "He and Kevin went to pick up Tom and Sarah from the airport. They should be back soon." She gave me a sympathetic look. "Diane, maybe you should have that conversation now, before they get back." My mother had followed me into the kitchen, wringing her hands in that familiar nervous gesture. "There's really nothing to discuss, Beth. Family decisions are private matters." "Private?" I laughed without humor. "Was it private when you let me spend months planning a party I'm now banned from? When you let me spend nearly $4,000 on an event I'm not allowed to attend? There's nothing private about this level of disrespect, Mom." Amy approached me cautiously. "Haley, we all feel terrible about this." I told them it wasn't right. But not terrible enough to actually stand up to Dad or Kevin, right? Not terrible enough to pick up the phone and warn me before Mom sent that cowardly text. The back door opened before Amy could respond. Kevin walked in, stopping short when he saw me. At 35, my brother had grown to resemble our father more each year, not just physically with his broad shoulders and stern expression, but in his certainty that his perspective was the only valid one. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, as if I were a stranger trespassing rather than his sister. "I came to understand why I've been excluded from a family event that I organized and paid for." "Care to explain your role in that decision, Kevin?" He crossed his arms defensively. "Dad's birthday should be a relaxed, enjoyable event. Not some elaborate production designed to make us all feel inadequate about our small-town lives." "Is that what you think this was? Some kind of power play? Come on, Haley. The fancy venue, the gourmet catering, the jazz quartet, none of that is Dad. That's all you, showing off what big city Haley can afford now." I stared at him, genuinely bewildered. The venue was chosen because it could accommodate the guest list Mom gave me. The catering features all Dad's favorite foods, prime rib, twice-baked potatoes. And the quartet plays the jazz standards he's loved since college. Every single decision was made with him in mind. Kevin seemed momentarily thrown by this information but recovered quickly. "Well, that's not how it came across to Dad. He felt like you were trying to turn his milestone birthday into something unrecognizable. And rather than talking to me about his concerns, he decided to ban me from attending? His own daughter?" The front door opened, and heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway. My father's voice carried from the entryway, "Kevin, give us a hand with these bags." Tom brought half his house for a 3-day stay. Then he appeared in the kitchen doorway, freezing when he saw me. At 60, or 3 days shy of it, Thomas Mitchell was still an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a full head of silver hair and penetrating blue eyes that could make you feel 2 inches tall with just a glance. Those eyes widened now in surprise before narrowing in displeasure. "Haley. We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I thought we should discuss why I've been uninvited from your birthday celebration, the one I organized and paid for." He looked to my mother, then Kevin, before responding. "This is hardly the time or place for that conversation. We have guests." "When would be a good time, Dad? After the party? After I've lost thousands of dollars? After everyone in town knows I was excluded from my own father's birthday?" His jaw tightened, a warning sign I recognized from childhood confrontations. "Your mother and I will reimburse you for any expenses. There's no need for dramatics. This isn't about the money." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "This is about being treated like I'm not part of this family. About planning something special for you, only to be tossed aside at the last minute because what? Because Kevin convinced you I had ulterior motives?" My father's expression darkened. "No one needs to convince me of anything about my own daughter. I know exactly who you are, Haley. You've made it clear for years that you're better than this town, better than our simple lives here. Everything has to be bigger, more impressive, more expensive with you. That's not true. I've never." He cut me off with a dismissive wave. "You've been trying to buy our approval since you moved to Chicago. The fancy Christmas gifts, the expensive restaurant dinners when we visit, as if we're charity cases who need your big city handouts." The cruelty of his misinterpretation stunned me into momentary silence. Every gift, every dinner had been a genuine attempt to share my life with them, to find common ground where conversation always failed. From the corner of my eye, I saw more relatives arriving through the front door: Uncle Jim, his wife Carla, their adult children. My humiliation was now on display for the extended family to witness. "Thomas," my mother said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." But my father, his audience now larger, seemed emboldened rather than deterred. "There's nothing to discuss. Haley can transfer the venue reservation to our name since she's already paid for it. She can go back to Chicago and her important career. We'll have a nice family celebration without the tension her presence always creates." The word family, used yet again to exclude me, was the final straw. Tears spilled down my cheeks despite my desperate attempt to hold them back. "I am your family," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm your daughter. How can you not see that everything I've done, the party, the planning, all of it, was just trying to make you happy? To finally do something that would make you proud of me?" The kitchen had grown crowded with relatives pretending not to listen while hearing every word. My father looked uncomfortable with my display of emotion, as he always had. "This is exactly what I mean," he said in a lower voice. "Everything becomes a production with you, Haley. A simple birthday turns into this dramatic scene." I heard a voice from the hallway, my Aunt Meredith, who had just arrived. "What's going on? Why is Haley crying?" And then, as relatives murmured explanations to each other, I overheard my father's response, not meant for my ears: "She's always trying to buy our approval. Some things can't be purchased." That statement, so fundamentally wrong yet so perfectly encapsulating how little my father understood me, broke something inside me. Without another word, I turned and walked upstairs to my old bedroom, now converted to a guest room with no trace of my existence. I sat on the unfamiliar bedspread, in the room where I'd spent 18 years of my life, and felt completely untethered. Through the walls, I could hear the continued murmur of voices downstairs, the occasional laugh as if nothing unusual had happened. Life continuing as normal in the Mitchell household, perhaps even improved by my removal from the scene. 10 minutes later, my mother knocked softly before entering. She sat beside me on the bed, not quite touching. "Haley, I know you're upset. But your father—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't make excuses for him. Not this time." She sighed heavily. "I tried to tell him you should be included. But when Kevin and your father agree on something, you know how impossible it is to change their minds. So you just gave up. Like always. Her face crumpled. That's not fair. I've always been caught in the middle, trying to keep peace. Peace at what cost, Mom? Your relationship with your daughter? My dignity? My sense of belonging in my own family? She had no answer for that. After an uncomfortable silence, she reached for my hand. Stay for dinner tonight. Maybe if your father sees you making an effort. I pulled my hand away. Making an effort? I've made nothing but effort my entire life. I'm done, Mom. Really done this time. She left me alone after that, closing the door softly behind her. Through the window, I watched more cars arriving, extended family gathering for the pre-party dinner I knew nothing about. Another event I hadn't been included in. I gathered my purse and car keys, composed myself as best I could, and slipped down the back stairs and out through the side door. No dramatic exit, no final confrontation. Just a quiet disappearance, ironically, exactly what my family had always expected of me. The Mapleton Inn was exactly as I remembered it, a modest two-story motel on the edge of town that had been outdated even in my childhood. But it was clean, affordable, and most importantly, not my parents' house. I checked in for 2 nights, dropped my suitcase on the floral bedspread, and sat heavily in the room's single armchair. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Amy, 1 from Mom, and a text from my cousin Megan. That was brutal. You okay? I wasn't ready to respond to any of them. Instead, I called the one person who had always seen me clearly. Stephanie answered on the second ring. Hey stranger. Aren't you supposed to be in Minnesota right now supervising your dad's birthday extravaganza? The simple question broke the dam. I sobbed out the whole story, the text, the confrontation, my father's cruel misinterpretation of my motives, my retreat to the Mapleton Inn. Those absolute bastards, Stephanie said when I finished. I'm booking a flight right now. Don't be ridiculous, I sniffled. You can't fly from Boston to Minnesota on a moment's notice. Watch me. My best friend is dealing with some next-level family betrayal. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Her loyalty, so different from what I'd just experienced with my blood relatives, started fresh tears. Seriously, Steph, I appreciate it more than I can say. But I need to handle this myself. She was quiet for a moment. Okay. I respect that. But what exactly are you handling? Are you still going to the party? Confronting your dad again? What's the plan here? That was the question, wasn't it? What was my plan? I'd flown to Minnesota on impulse, driven by hurt and anger rather than strategy. Now I was sitting in a dated motel room with no clear next steps. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to just go home to Chicago and pretend none of this happened. But that means losing all the money I spent. And letting them win. This isn't about winning or losing, Hales. It's about what's going to help you move forward. Stephanie's wisdom, as usual, cut through my emotional fog. You're right. I need to think about what I actually want out of this situation. So what do you want? Forget your family's expectations for a minute. What would make you feel better about this whole mess? I considered the question seriously. I don't want that beautiful party I planned to go to waste. I put so much thought into every detail. But I also don't want to give my father and Kevin the satisfaction of using what I created while excluding me. A crazy idea began forming in my mind. What if I still held the party? Just not for my father? I'm listening, Stephanie said, interest clear in her voice. I'm the one who signed the contracts. My name is on all the paperwork. The venue, the catering, the musicians, they're all expecting to work with me, not my parents. Are you saying you want to repurpose your dad's birthday party? For what? The idea crystallized as I spoke it aloud. For a celebration of my own. Not a birthday, but a liberation party. A thank you to all the people in my life who have actually supported me, unlike my blood relatives. I love this, Stephanie said immediately. Reclaim the event you created. But who would come on such short notice? Wouldn't it just be you alone in a big venue? That was the potential flaw in my plan. I mentally ran through people from Mapleton who might actually show up for me: my high school English teacher Mrs. Sanderson, my old friend Bridget who still lived in town, maybe a couple of cousins who'd witnessed today's scene and felt sympathetic. It wouldn't be 63 people, that's for sure. But even a small group would be better than letting all that food and planning go to waste. What about timing? Would you have it at the same time as your dad's new party, wherever that will be? I hadn't considered that complication. I don't even know what their plan is now. I assume they're still using Mason's barn since I already paid for it, but they'd need to contact Martha directly to take over the reservation. A quick check of my watch showed it was just past 4 p.m. The venue should still be open. I need to call Martha right away and figure out what's happening. After promising to update Stephanie later, I hung up and immediately dialed Mason's barn. Martha answered, her warm voice a balm after the coldness I'd experienced from my family. "Haley. I was just about to call you. I got the strangest message from a man claiming to be your father, asking about changing the name on Saturday's reservation." My heart sank. That probably was my father. There's been a family situation. I'm actually calling to understand my options here. Well, legally speaking, the contract is with you, not your father. The deposit came from your account. So any changes would need your approval. A surge of relief washed through me. So technically, the venue is still mine for Saturday night? Absolutely. But honey, what's going on? This doesn't sound like the happy family birthday we've been planning. I gave her the condensed version, trying to keep my voice steady. Martha's sympathy was palpable. That's just awful, Haley. Family can be so complicated. The thing is, Martha, I don't want all our planning to go to waste. Would it be possible to keep the reservation but change the nature of the event? Not a 60th birthday party but something different? Of course. It's your event, you can celebrate whatever you like. The decorations can be adjusted, and we haven't printed the welcome sign yet. With growing excitement, I outlined my new vision, a chosen family celebration honoring the people who had genuinely supported me throughout my life. Martha was enthusiastically on board, promising to contact the decorating team about the changes. Next, I called Riverbank Catering. Thankfully, Jason, the owner, was equally understanding when I explained the situation. The food order is already in process, but we can definitely adjust the cake messaging and remove the 60th decorative elements, he assured me. With the core vendors secured, I faced my biggest challenge, finding guests who could attend on 2 days' notice. I started with a text to Bridget, my closest friend from high school days. "This is wildly last minute, but would you be free Saturday night for an impromptu party at Mason's barn? Long story involving family drama, but I have a fully catered event with no guests. Could use a friendly face." Her response came quickly, 100% yes. "Need details. Also, can bring husband and my sister if that helps fill seats." One by one, I reached out to people from my Mapleton past who had shown me kindness: Mrs. Sanderson and her husband, Mr. Reeves who had given me my first job at the local bookstore. 3 cousins on my mother's side who had always made me feel included at family gatherings, even Dr. Martin, my childhood pediatrician who had always treated me with respect when I felt invisible everywhere else. To my shock and gratitude, almost everyone said yes. I also called 4 colleagues from Chicago who I knew had family in Minneapolis, on the off chance they might be visiting this weekend. 2 were actually in the area and immediately accepted. By 8 p.m., I had confirmed 17 guests, a far cry from 63, but enough to make the evening feel like a real celebration rather than a sad woman alone with too much prime rib. As a final touch of defiance, I called the jazz quartet and requested an addition to their playlist, "I Will Survive" by Gloria Gaynor. Not exactly standard jazz fare, but they assured me they could arrange a version. Sitting back on the motel bed, I felt a strange lightness replacing the heavy despair of hours earlier. This wasn't the weekend I had planned, not even close. But for the first time in my relationship with my family, I wasn't simply accepting what was handed to me. I was creating something new from the wreckage. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father says the venue won't transfer the reservation without your permission. Please don't make this difficult, Haley." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing my response. "The venue is no longer available. I'm using it for another event. You'll need to make other arrangements." Then I turned off my phone, closed my eyes, and for the first time that day, smiled a real smile. Saturday night would still feature a celebration at Mason's barn, just not the one anyone had expected. Saturday evening arrived with perfect spring weather, mild temperatures, clear skies, and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of lilacs from neighboring gardens. I pulled into Mason's barn parking lot 2 hours before the event was scheduled to begin, my rental car trunk filled with last-minute additions, photo collages I'd created at the 24-hour copy shop, featuring snapshots of me with the friends attending tonight, handwritten thank you cards for each guest, and a hastily purchased found family banner that the copy shop owner had helped me design. Martha met me at the entrance, enveloping me in a warm hug that nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. "It looks beautiful, Haley. Come see." She led me into the transformed space. White string lights twinkled from the wooden beams overhead. Round tables dotted the polished floor, each centered with simple arrangements of spring flowers. At the front of the room, where a happy 60th birthday Thomas banner would have hung, was now an elegant sign reading "Celebration of Chosen Family." "It's perfect," I whispered, emotion tightening my throat. "The catering team will arrive in 30 minutes, Martha said. "And I've set up the welcome table just as you asked, with the photo display space right here." I busied myself with final touches, arranging photos, placing handwritten cards at each setting, positioning the guest book by the entrance. Physical tasks helped calm my nervous energy. What if no one showed up? What if my hastily assembled guest list consisted entirely of pity acceptances with no intention of actually attending? At 6:15, the catering team arrived, led by Jason. At 6:30, the jazz quartet began setting up their instruments. By 6:45, everything was ready, and I stood alone in the beautifully prepared space, fighting waves of alternating confidence and panic. The first guests arrived at 6:52, Bridget, her husband Dave, and her sister Allison, bearing a bouquet of daisies and enthusiastic hugs. "This is either the most brilliant or most insane thing I've ever heard," Bridget said, squeezing my hands. "Either way, I'm completely here for it." More arrivals followed in quick succession: Mrs. Sanderson and her husband, my Chicago colleagues Jennifer and Marcus, Mr. Reeves from the bookstore, 3 cousins from my mother's side of the family. By 7:15, 15 of my 17 confirmed guests had arrived, creating a small but lively gathering. The jazz quartet began playing as Jason's team served appetizers. I moved among my guests, overwhelmed by their willingness to show up on such short notice, by the genuine affection in their greetings, by the absence of the tension that had characterized every Mitchell family gathering I could remember. At 7:30, the side door opened, and Amy walked in with her husband Tyler. I froze, uncertain what her presence meant. Was she here to convince me to end this childish display, as my father would surely call it? She approached hesitantly. "Is it okay that we're here? We can leave if you want." "That depends," I said carefully. "Why did you come?" "Because you're my sister. And what happened was wrong." She handed me a small gift bag. "This isn't much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside was a framed photo of Amy and me as children, arms around each other, laughing at some forgotten joke. On the back, she had written, "Family is as family does." "I'm sorry I haven't done better." "I'm trying now." I hugged her tightly, tears threatening again. "Thank you for coming. It means everything." With Amy and Tyler, my guest list reached 17, a far cry from the original 63, but somehow more meaningful than I could have imagined. These people were here not out of obligation, but genuine choice. As dinner was served, the prime rib my father would never taste, Mr. Reeves requested permission to say a few words. The elderly bookseller stood, raising his water glass. I've known Haley since she was 14, shelving books after school and reading poetry on her breaks. Even then, I could see she had a special quality, a determination to create beauty where others might not see possibilities. He smiled at me warmly. This evening is proof of that spirit. When life handed her rejection, she built connection. When faced with exclusion, she created belonging. I'm honored to be included in this remarkable gathering. Others offered impromptu toasts throughout the meal. Mrs. Sanderson spoke of my creative writing from high school, reading a poem I'd written at 16 that she'd kept all these years. Jennifer shared stories from our early days at Horizon Marketing. Bridget recalled our teenage adventures with affectionate laughter. What struck me most was how these disparate people from different chapters of my life, who had never met before tonight, connected so easily, united by their genuine care for me. There was no performative politeness, no tense undercurrents, no walking on eggshells around an easily offended patriarch. Around 8:30, as dessert was being served, my phone lit up with texts from various relatives. Where is everyone? Dad's party only has 20 people here. Why are the Sandersons at Mason's barn? We're at the lakeside. Is there a competing party happening? So confused. I showed the messages to Amy, who grimaced. They ended up having to move the party to the lakeside restaurant when they couldn't take over your reservation. Mom's been calling everyone today trying to redirect people, but it's been chaotic. I'm sorry it's affecting Mom, I said, surprised to find I genuinely meant it. But I'm not sorry about reclaiming this event. You shouldn't be, Amy said firmly. What you've created here is beautiful. At 9:15, the quartet shifted into their arrangement of I Will Survive, drawing cheers from my guests who recognized the symbolism immediately. Bridget pulled me onto the small dance floor, and soon everyone had joined in, laughing and singing along to the anthem of resilience and self-respect. As I looked around at these people, some I'd known for decades, others relative newcomers to my life, I realized I hadn't lost family this weekend. I'd simply recognized who my true family had been all along. The Monday after I returned to Chicago, I woke to a text from my mother, "We need to talk about what happened. Call when you can." I stared at those words, feeling not the usual rush of anxiety such messages typically provoked, but a strange new calm. For the first time, I didn't feel compelled to immediately respond, to smooth things over, to maintain the illusion of family harmony at the expense of my own dignity. I went to work, completed a productive day, attended my regular Monday evening yoga class, and only when I felt centered and ready, called my mother back. "Hi, Mom." "Haley." Her voice sounded tired. "I've been waiting for your call. I needed some time to process everything." A pause. "Your father is very upset about what happened." Of course that would be her opening, my father's feelings, not mine. Not the hurt they had caused or the humiliation I had endured. "I imagine he is," I said neutrally. "Having his party relocated must have been inconvenient." It was more than inconvenient. It was embarrassing. People were confused, showing up at the wrong venue. Some left altogether when they heard there was conflict. I took a deep breath. "I'm not responsible for that outcome, Mom. I didn't uninvite myself from a party I had planned and paid for. I didn't text my daughter 3 days before an event to tell her she wasn't welcome. Those were your choices, not mine. Haley, you know how complicated family dynamics can be." "Stop." My interruption surprised us both. "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not pretending that what happened was a simple misunderstanding or a communication problem. It was a deliberate exclusion, and it was cruel." The silence that followed stretched so long I wondered if she had hung up. "What do you want from us, Haley?" she finally asked, her voice small. It was a question no one in my family had ever asked me before. "I want acknowledgement that what happened was wrong. I want an actual apology, not excuses or justifications or 'that's just how Dad is.'" And going forward, I want boundaries that protect me from being hurt like this again. Boundaries? She sounded genuinely confused by the term. Yes, Mom. Boundaries. Like I won't participate in family events where I'm treated as less important than Kevin or Amy. I won't accept last-minute changes that disregard my feelings. And I won't continue to pretend everything is fine when it's not. Your father won't understand that kind of talk. Then I won't be speaking with him until he can. I'm not cutting contact completely, but I'm no longer participating in the family dynamic that's been hurting me my entire life. The conversation ended shortly after, without resolution but with a new clarity between us. My mother didn't promise to respect my boundaries or offer meaningful apologies. But for the first time, I hadn't compromised my truth to make her comfortable, and that itself felt like progress. The following week, I started therapy again, working with Dr. Lisa Chen, a specialist in family trauma. In our first session, I unloaded the entire birthday party saga, from the initial planning through the text message, confrontation, and my reclaimed celebration. What you did was remarkably healthy, Dr. Chen said after listening attentively. Instead of either suppressing your feelings or exploding in unproductive anger, you channeled your hurt into a constructive alternative. That shows significant emotional intelligence. It didn't feel intelligent at the time, I admitted. It felt desperate and maybe a little petty. Growth isn't always graceful in the moment. But the outcome, creating connection where there had been rejection, that's profound healing work. Over the next 6 months, weekly sessions with Dr. Chen helped me understand patterns I'd been blind to my entire life. I wasn't the problem in my family, I was simply the one refusing to play the assigned role, the one holding up a mirror to dysfunction others preferred to ignore. My father's rejection wasn't about my worth but his limitations. My mother's enabling wasn't about love for him but fear of conflict. Most importantly, I learned that I could love my family while also protecting myself from their harmful behaviors. Love and boundaries could coexist. My relationship with Amy flourished during this time. Without our parents as intermediaries, we developed a more honest connection. She visited Chicago twice, experiences that helped her understand my life beyond the caricature our father had created a big city Haley showing off. We spoke weekly, conversations that sometimes included difficult truths about our shared childhood but always ended with stronger understanding. Kevin remained distant, sending a brief text on my birthday but otherwise maintaining radio silence. I left the door open but didn't pursue him, recognizing that his identity was too enmeshed with our father's approval for him to risk independent thought. My mother made halting efforts at change. She called more regularly, asked questions about my work that showed genuine interest, and even attended a therapy session with me during her cautious visit to Chicago in November. But whenever my father entered the conversation, she reverted to her enabling patterns, showing how deeply entrenched some dynamics remained. As for my father, he sent a check for $3,800 2 weeks after the party, exact to the penny, with no note attached. I donated the money to a local Chicago arts program for teens, finding poetry and using funds meant to buy his approval to instead support young creative spirits like I had once been. He never called, never apologized. Through my mother, I heard he considered the matter resolved with the repayment. I wasn't surprised, true accountability had never been in his emotional vocabulary. But for the first time, his silence didn't devastate me. I no longer measured my worth by his approval. The most unexpected growth happened in my professional life. After years of second-guessing my ideas, deferring to more confident, usually male, colleagues, and minimizing my contributions, I began advocating for myself with new confidence. 6 months after the birthday party incident, I proposed and secured a major new client that competitors had been pursuing for years. My presentation to their board was bold, innovative, and delivered without the self-doubt that had previously held me back. When my boss asked what had changed in my approach, I answered honestly, I stopped trying to please people who can't be pleased, and started trusting my own judgment instead. The following April, as my father's 61st birthday approached, I sent a simple card with a gift certificate to his favorite steakhouse. No grand gestures, no desperate bids for approval, just a basic acknowledgement appropriate to our current relationship status. It felt healthy, proportional, and most importantly, genuine. On the anniversary of what I now called my liberation celebration, I hosted a dinner for local friends in Chicago. As we shared a meal in my condo, I realized how differently I now defined family. Not by blood or obligation, but by respect, support, and the freedom to be authentically myself. The pain of that text message, "You're not coming. Dad wants just family," had diminished from sharp sting to occasional ache. In its place grew the understanding that family is not a static designation but a dynamic relationship, one that requires mutual care to thrive. Some blood connections may weaken or break, while chosen bonds strengthen into something just as meaningful, sometimes more so. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my father. Perhaps there will eventually be reconciliation, or perhaps the distance between us will remain. What I do know is that my worth isn't determined by his recognition of it. My place at the table, any table, isn't dependent on his invitation. Sometimes the most powerful response to rejection isn't fighting for inclusion but creating your own celebration, one where everyone is welcome and valued just as they are. That's the table I'm building now, and there will always be an open seat for anyone ready to meet me with genuine respect. What about you? Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? Or found yourself building a chosen family when your birth one fell short? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button. It helps more people find these conversations about family, boundaries, and self-worth. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and I wish you courage in navigating your own.